Hi, this is Sean Bodley with Clear Technologies, and I'm about to give an overview and demonstration of how to perform a rolling migration from version 6.1 of PowerHA to the latest and greatest as of the date that this recording was made in January of 2016 of PowerHA version 7.2. So first, let me give an overview of the steps required to perform a migration. Now, these steps are pretty much identical to what they've been migrating from version 6.1 to 7 something in the past. There's just been a couple of enhancements and a few nuances to know about 7.2 specifically that I'm going to point out. So quickly I'll go through the steps that with a rolling migration, we're performing an upgrade of one node at a time while still keeping the cluster and the resources up and running. So traditionally I start with the standby node, so I stop cluster services on one node, I upgrade or update AIX, whatever is appropriate as needed. And if you haven't already been on a version that supports any of the version 7 of PowerHA, then you need to make sure that boss.cluster and boss.hafs are installed. Now, one nuance with PowerHA 7.2 specifically has to deal with when also upgrading to AIX 7.2. There's a couple of RSCT file set incompatibilities when migrating to 7.2. So there's a couple of file sets that have to be removed prior to performing the upgrade. It is documented in the release notes in the upcoming PowerHA 7.2 Redbook that we are still currently working on. I will probably put a link in the description or the comments section of this video taking you exactly to what those steps are. Then we update the etc cluster rhosts file. That's actually plural, should be an S there. Why don't I go ahead and fix that while I'm sitting here, okay? And normally you can enter either the cluster name or the IP address of each node. So it's a node host name specifically. Historically I've done IP address, but in newer releases I've succumbed to starting to do the host name. As long as it's resolvable, it should work fine. One per line, and then you refresh clcomd. Now the next part here of executing clmigcheck, again these steps are the same, however clmigcheck in version 7.2 has been greatly enhanced. It does a far number of more checking of things that need to be just right to help ensure for a successful migration. So there has been a lot of work done on clmigcheck, and one thing you'll notice if you've ever done any of these in the past is that there's an additional menu option. It used to be only 1 through 3 before, now it's 1 through 4, and now option 1 will actually prompt you with a list of PowerHA version 7 somethings that you could migrate to based on the AIX level detected. So historically it always assumed that you were migrating to the latest level that the AIX level that you were on supported. Now you get to choose that. So I will show that in the demonstration. It's also helpful because certain restrictions that have applied in the version 7 release, each one of those has been, more and more have been removed in each release. So it also helps check exactly which rules and features apply for your target version. So then the other two options are stuff that we've had before. They're just in a different place now. So we'll check the ODM to make sure that the cluster has all the supported elements. This is also something that you could perform a clmigcheck prior to your actual maintenance window. Other than the AIX target level issue, which may be different during the middle of your migration, but overall it's kind of nice to know if you're cluster config is valid for migration anyway. And then the last option 4 is we tell it if we want to use unicast or multicast, and what disk do we want to use for repository disk, which is a new requirement in version 7 as a whole. We will then upgrade PowerHA, install the base and SP1. Overall, it's a good idea that probably don't even bother testing with the base code. Strongly recommended doing SP1 before you do any of the migrations. However, if the time you are performing this migration, SP1 is still unavailable, which I believe it's targeted to come out either the end of the first quarter or the beginning of the second quarter currently, but of course that may change. At least contact support and see if you can get this iFix. It's a cluster manager fix, and I can almost guarantee you if you do not have this fix that your likelihood for success of a rolling migration is very little. Then after the update is completed, you can review the CL convert log if you want. I'm not really going to show that, but you can see the conversion stuff that's been performed. Restart the cluster, add the node back into the cluster. If you moved a resource group previously, you may need to move it back. And then we repeat these steps for each node in the cluster. We still run CL make check the next time, but when you run it on additional nodes, it already knows that it's been run previously, and so it won't give you menu options, and I'll show that. And so, speaking of the menu options, I'll show you what each one of these ends up performing. So, when we go to option 1, it shows me these options to migrate to. Now, overall, you probably really shouldn't even have 7.1.0. It was withdrawn a year after it came out. So, even though it's maybe nice that it's put in there, you shouldn't be doing any 7.1.0 at all at this point. So in my example, I'm going to be doing 7.2.0, so we'll see that I'm going to use option 5. And then when I get back to the main menu, I'll choose option 2 to tell it to check my ODM, and this is the next screen of output down here, is that it detects my disk heartbeat, and disk heartbeat in its traditional form is not supported in version 7. But it will automatically be removed for us. And then after hitting in there, it tells me that there's no unsupported ODM, so we can carry on. So then when I go back to the main menu and I choose option 4, it gives me this option to choose multicast or unicast. I expect the huge majority of people will use unicast, so I choose option 3, and then specify which disk I want to use for the repository disks. And actually I missed the output over here, but the newer versions of CL MIGCheck actually will report the disks and their sizes to you, which is quite helpful. It's pretty common to use a 1 gig repository disk. What this does is it will actually scan and find any disks with shared PVIDs between the systems and that are currently not part of a volume group. And we can just choose it off the list. So that's a quick and dirty overview. I'm going to give highlights of my cluster config. So I'm starting off with HA61 SP15, which happens to be the last fix pack available for 6.1 because support has already gone for it, so there shouldn't be anything newer. One of the things CL MIGCheck actually does too is it'll look to see if you're using SP15. If not, it'll give you a warning that says, hey, you should probably be using SP15 before you perform a migration, though it doesn't prevent you from performing the migration. Now in my case, my AIX level is already installed to support PowerHA 7.2, so I'm not going to be performing an AIX upgrade in this demo, but be aware of what I stated in the previous charts about if you do upgrade to 7.2 to be aware of the RSCT workaround. So I have a simple 2-node, what I call a hot standby resource group, and v7.2a is my primary, 7.2p is the standby single volume group, single app server, and service IP. Now down here at the bottom I just highlighted that I've got a disk heartbeat network, again pretty common in version 6 and prior. And the reason why I highlighted that in red is because I said it's not supported. We will see a warning on it. But then after the migration, if you look at the bottom here, you will see that my disk heartbeat is gone. So pretty much everything else looks the same except my HA level is at the latest. At the time of this recording, SP1 was not available, but I do have the iFix and will actually show installing the iFix in this demonstration. So I have already pre-recorded my sessions of upgrading my cluster, so I'll switch over to that in just a second and start showing it. If you're watching this video, you're probably seeing it on my YouTube channel anyway, but I have a bunch of other migration and some administration videos on PowerHA. And then of course there's several PowerHA Red books that I'm quite fond of all these. I actually was fortunate enough to get to work on them. And then we currently have a PowerHA 7.2. It's predominantly going to be an update Red book in the works. Overall, my favorite is this PowerHA for AIX cookbook. We updated it again to 7.1.3. So in my opinion, from a completeness perspective, as far as planning, installing, configuring, using a lot of the advanced options, testing, stuff like that, that cookbook is the most thorough out of all of them. But each book has additional things that has some specialties in it that the others don't. So, okay, so with that being said, feel free to follow me on Twitter, and then PowerHA Wiki is a great source of information. It'll have links to these demos, white papers, the red books, all kinds of good stuff out there, so feel free to check that out. So now I will switch over to my pre-recorded demo and talk to it. Okay, so this is my two-node cluster. My prod node is on the left here. My standby node is on the right. You can see that I had 6.1 SP15. My cluster is stable, and the first thing I'm going to do is stop the cluster services on the standby node. And since it's not hosting any resources, you see that this actually came down very quickly. I'm showing a nit on the status on the other side. So I'm just proving here that my AIX level is already high enough to support PowerHA version 7. So I'll show the contents of my Etsy cluster R hosts and refresh the CLCOM-D daemon. And now I'm ready to run CLMIG check. So because I had run it previously before, it found a file that already existed, so I told it, yes, I want to go ahead and overwrite it, and let's do this again. So as you can see, it created a cluster snapshot for me. That's always a good practice to have a snapshot to recover from. So first thing I'll do is option 1 and choose what version of HA I'm migrating to, which in this case is 5.4.7.2.0. Then I'll go ahead and tell it to check my ODM, and as I mentioned before, it comes back giving a warning about the disk heartbeat, but don't worry about it, it's going to remove it at the end of the migration anyway. So I have no other unsupported elements in my cluster, so now I'm going to specify my heartbeat type and the repository disk by choosing option 4. This is doing a quick discovery here. So I chose option 3 for unicast, and then it gives me my list of disks to choose from here. I'm choosing number 2 on the list. My HDisk numbers just happen to be the same on that one. So now that I've filled in all the required information, I can go ahead and update my cluster. So I'm just doing an update all, upgrading it to 7.2. Always remember to accept new license agreements. And this only takes maybe 2 minutes for it to update. I did time edit a few seconds out of it, but not a lot in the grand scheme of things. Okay, so now 7.2 has been updated. Now I mentioned the iFix. So this is a cluster manager iFix, so I'm going to go ahead and load that before I start cluster services again. And now I simply restart the node back into the cluster. Now again, it was the standby node, so it doesn't have any resources to acquire. Since I did stop and upgrade this so quickly, it's actually telling me I have to wait before I can restart Cluster Manager. So I time edited a few seconds out of that as well. So I've got the OK prompt, and if I watch over to the left here, I can see that it's joining. It's still coming up, waiting for it to stabilize, and now it's stable. So now what I need to do is I'm going to switch the monitoring. I'm going to put it on my standby node, and now I'm going to stop prod and tell it to move the resource group to the standby node. So right now we're in a mixed cluster state. You can see I've got HA7.2 on standby, and I still have 6.1SP15 on prod. So now I essentially repeat all of the same steps that I did on standby. I'm showing my OS level. I'm also going to cat my cluster R host, but before I do that, let me show my my disk setup. I chose the disk that ended in 4414 for my repository disk, so you can see currently it's not part of anything. I'm showing this because when I run clmigcheck the second time, it's going to create the CAA cluster for me, and you'll see this get propagated with CAA VG private. So just displaying my rhost on prod. Going to go ahead and refresh clcomd and then run clmigcheck again on the primary node. So this is doing some validation just like it does on the first one, but it won't give me a menu. This says, hey, by the way, I'm about to create a CAA cluster. This is going to take a couple of minutes. So I hit enter and tell it to continue. And I time edited a piece out of this while that was running. So normally you'll see it pop up after maybe a minute. So you can see here I've got CAA VG private already active. I'll wait for it to finish on the primary node, and it gives you this big message that says, oh, by the way, it's mandatory. You must install the newer versions now because you have your CAA cluster created. So I'm repeating the same update all to get to 7.2.0 base, and then just like before, when this completes, I will put the iFix on as well. Okay, so that is done. I'll leave my status running on standby. I will go ahead and put my iFix on. And now I'm ready to rejoin it back into the cluster. Now because I have don't fall back set up for the resource group, it won't automatically take the resources back. But what you do is you restart it, you wait for the clusters to stabilize, and then you just move the resource group back. Generally after the migration, you need to wait a couple of minutes and actually let the migration complete. You can check the version output to validate that. I like to also look and see my disk heartbeat disappear. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and move it. And because I have no real application, it moves very quickly. So it runs a kind of a dummy stop script, unmounts ferry-offs, moves the IP address back to the primary node. So it's now showing that it's back and stable, and my primary system should be coming back and telling me that it's complete, and there it is. So that's it. In a nutshell, that is performing a rolling migration on a 2-node hot standby cluster. As usual, if you have any questions, send me an email at the email address provided at the beginning of this presentation, or ask down in the comments section. I'll see if I can't reply to it. And as always, thanks for watching, and if you have any comments, suggestions on other demos you'd like to see, if I can accommodate it, I'll surely try. So, thanks for watching.